"Please, just make it quick," she whispered. The next 5 seconds changed her forever. She sat on the hard chair with her back straight, even though her body wanted to fold inward. The chair was cold, made of metal, and it pressed against her legs in a way that made her aware of every second she had been sitting there. The room was small and quiet, too quiet for a place where people came to change their lives. The walls were pale and clean, almost empty, with only a clock hanging slightly crooked above the door. Its ticking sound felt louder than it should have, like it was counting down something important. She kept her hands in her lap, fingers tightly locked together. If she loosened them, she knew they would shake. Her nails pressed into her skin, but she welcomed the feeling. It reminded her that she was still here, still real, still breathing. Her chest felt tight, and she had to remind herself to breathe slowly, the way she had practiced in her head while waiting. She had been waiting for a long time. At least it felt that way. Time moved strangely in this place. Sometimes a minute felt like an hour, and sometimes an hour disappeared without her noticing. She didn't know exactly how long she had been there, only that she had arrived early because she was afraid of being late. Being late would have made things worse. Being late would have meant explaining herself, and she didn't have the strength for explanations anymore. She looked down at the floor, which was spotless and smooth. She could see the faint reflection of her shoes. They were old but clean. She had chosen them carefully that morning, standing in front of the mirror longer than usual. She had wanted to look normal. She had wanted to look like someone who had everything under control. In the mirror, she had practiced a calm face, one that didn't show fear or doubt. But now, sitting alone in this room, she felt that calm face slipping away. Her thoughts drifted back to the days that led her here. They came in pieces, not in order. Conversations she wished she could forget. Nights when sleep refused to come. Moments when she stared at the ceiling, asking herself the same questions over and over again. How did it come to this? When did everything start to feel so heavy? She remembered telling herself that it would pass, that things would get better on their own. But they hadn't. Instead, each day added another layer of worry, another reason she felt trapped. She shifted slightly in her chair, the metal scraping softly against the floor. The sound made her tense, and she froze, listening. Nothing else moved. The room stayed silent. She wondered if anyone else could hear the clock the way she did, if anyone else felt like it was watching her. She wasn't used to asking for help. That was one of the hardest parts. All her life, she had learned to handle things on her own. When something went wrong, she adjusted. When something hurt, she stayed quiet. People around her often described her as strong, responsible, dependable. She had believed them for a long time. But strength, she was learning, could become a burden when you carried it alone for too long. Her mind returned to the present when she heard footsteps outside the door. They were faint but clear enough to make her heart jump. She straightened again, wiping her palms on her clothes, even though no one could see her yet. The footsteps paused, then moved on. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She wondered what she would say when the moment came. She had gone over it in her head so many times. Short answers, calm words, no unnecessary details. She didn't want to tell her whole story. She didn't even know how to begin telling it. Some parts felt too personal, too painful to say out loud. Other parts felt confusing, even to her. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? Her throat felt dry. She swallowed and reached for the small bottle of water in her bag, taking a careful sip. The water tasted plain, but it helped. She placed the bottle back where it had been neatly, like everything else. Keeping things neat gave her a small sense of control. She closed her eyes for a moment. Behind her eyelids, images flashed quickly. Faces of people she cared about. Places that once felt safe. Moments of laughter that now seemed far away. She wondered what they would think if they saw her here, sitting in this room, waiting. Would they understand? Would they judge her? The thought made her chest tighten again. She reminded herself why she was here. She had reached a point where doing nothing felt worse than facing her fear. Every option she had considered had led her back to this decision. She didn't know what would happen afterward. She only knew that she couldn't keep living the way she had been. Something had to change, even if the change scared her. The door finally opened slowly with a soft sound. She looked up immediately. A person stood there, calm and professional, holding a file. Their face was neutral, not cold, not warm, just neutral. That somehow made it harder. She searched their expression for clues, for comfort, for anything that might tell her how this would go. They spoke her name, correctly, clearly. Hearing it made everything feel suddenly real. She nodded and stood up, her legs slightly unsteady. She took one step forward, then another, forcing herself to move normally. She followed them into the next room, which looked similar but felt different, more serious, more final. She was guided to another chair, softer this time. She sat down carefully, placing her bag by her feet. Her heart was beating fast now, and she could hear it in her ears. The person in front of her explained a few things in a steady voice. Simple instructions. What would happen next? What she needed to do. The words washed over her, and she focused hard to understand every sentence. She nodded at the right moments, even when her mind struggled to keep up. She didn't want to ask too many questions. Asking questions felt like delaying the inevitable. She just wanted it to be over. There was a pause. A brief silence filled the space between them. Then came the question she had been expecting, the one she had prepared for. "Are you ready?" The room seemed to hold its breath. She felt a sudden wave of fear rise inside her, stronger than before. For a second she considered saying no. She imagined standing up, walking out, pretending this never happened. But she knew she wouldn't make it far. The fear would follow her. The weight would still be there. She took a deep breath. Her voice felt small when she finally spoke. "Please just make it quick," she whispered. The words surprised her a little. She hadn't planned to say them exactly like that. They came from a place deeper than thought, from pure need. She wasn't asking for comfort or reassurance. She was asking for speed, for an end to the waiting, to the fear that had been growing for so long. As soon as the words left her mouth, she felt a strange calm settle over her. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was something close, a quiet acceptance. She had crossed a line now. There was no turning back. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this simple sentence spoken in a whisper, was the last moment of her old life. The next few seconds would change her in ways she couldn't imagine. But for now, all she could do was sit still, breathe, and wait as the clock on the wall continued to tick, counting down the end of who she used to be. The room felt smaller than before, even though nothing had changed. She sat still, exactly where she had been told to sit, her back straight and her hands resting quietly in her lap. The air felt heavier now, like it carried more meaning. Every sound seemed sharper. The soft movement nearby, the quiet breath she tried to control. The steady beat of her heart, which refused to slow down. She kept her eyes focused on a single point in front of her, not because it was important, but because looking anywhere else felt impossible. If she let her eyes wander, her thoughts might follow, and she was afraid of where they might go. So she stared, blinking slowly, telling herself to stay calm, to stay present. Someone spoke again, gently this time, reminding her to relax. The voice was calm and steady, as if this moment was ordinary. That calm made her feel both comforted and strangely alone. This moment was ordinary for others, maybe, but for her it felt like standing at the edge of something unknown. She took another deep breath, filling her lungs as much as she could. She counted silently in her head, just like she had practiced. 1, 2, 3. The numbers helped, but only a little. Her body felt tense, ready to react even though she told herself not to. Then it began. At first she wasn't sure what she was feeling. It wasn't exactly pain, but it wasn't comfort either. It was sudden, unexpected, and strong enough to make her gasp softly. Her fingers curled without her meaning them to, gripping the fabric of her clothes. Her heart jumped, and for a brief moment, panic rushed through her like a wave. This wasn't how she imagined it would feel. Time seemed to slow down. The clock she had heard so clearly before faded into the background. Everything narrowed to the next few seconds, stretching longer than they should have. Her thoughts scattered. She tried to remind herself that this would pass quickly, that she had asked for it to be quick. But her body reacted faster than her thoughts could keep up. She squeezed her eyes shut, her lashes pressing together tightly. She focused on breathing, but her breaths came unevenly now. In, out, in, out. She repeated the words silently, hoping they would guide her through. Her mind flashed to another place, another time. A memory of standing by a window on a quiet afternoon, sunlight warming her face. The memory felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. She clung to it anyway, using it as an anchor while the present moment threatened to overwhelm her. Then, just as suddenly as it began, something shifted. The feeling changed, softened, then faded. She realized she had been holding her breath again and quickly inhaled, filling her lungs with air that felt too cold and too sharp. Her shoulders dropped slightly, releasing tension she hadn't noticed building. It was over. The realization didn't come all at once. It arrived slowly, carefully, like her mind needed time to accept it. She opened her eyes, blinking a few times as the room came back into focus. Everything looked the same. The walls, the chair, the person standing nearby. Yet she felt different, like something inside her had moved out of place. She felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. Relief that the waiting was done. Confusion because she didn't feel the way she expected to feel. She had imagined a clear reaction, something easy to understand. Instead, her emotions felt tangled, layered on top of each other. Someone spoke again, telling her it was done, that she had done well. The words reached her ears, but it took a moment for them to fully register. She nodded automatically, not trusting her voice yet. If she spoke, she wasn't sure what would come out. Her body felt light and heavy at the same time. Light because the moment she had feared was behind her. Heavy because she sensed that something important had happened, something she would need time to understand. She shifted slightly in her seat, testing how she felt. Her movements were slow and careful, like she was learning how to move again. She noticed her hands were still clenched. Slowly, she forced her fingers to relax. They felt stiff, as if they had been frozen in place. She placed them flat on her thighs, grounding herself in the simple pressure. The room felt quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. This quiet felt deeper, filled with meaning. She became aware of small details she hadn't noticed earlier, the faint hum in the background, the soft light above her, the steady presence of the person nearby giving her space. She was given a few moments to sit, to breathe, to collect herself. She appreciated that more than she expected. She needed those moments. Her thoughts were beginning to return, one by one, and with them came questions. Was that it? Was this the moment that was supposed to change everything? She searched inside herself for a clear answer but found only uncertainty. She didn't feel dramatic or transformed. She didn't feel broken either. She felt altered in a quiet way, like a book whose ending had been changed without rewriting the whole story. She stood up slowly when she was told she could. Her legs felt slightly unsteady, but they held her weight. She was relieved by that small proof of normalcy. She took one careful step, then another. Each step felt important, like she was moving forward not just in space but in time. As she moved, she noticed a subtle shift in how she saw the room. The fear that had filled it earlier was gone, replaced by a thoughtful calm. The sharp edge of panic had softened into something quieter, heavier, but more manageable. She was guided through a few simple instructions, things she needed to remember. She listened closely, nodding when appropriate. This time the words stayed with her. She wanted to do everything right. Doing things right felt important now, even if she wasn't sure why. When it was time to leave the room, she paused briefly near the door. She glanced back once, taking in the space where those few seconds had unfolded. It felt strange to know that something so important had happened in such an ordinary-looking place. Outside, the world continued as usual. People moved, sounds carried, time marched on. That realization struck her deeply. While her life had just shifted, the world hadn't noticed. It didn't stop or slow down for her moment. It simply kept going. She stepped forward, joining that movement again. As she did, she felt a quiet awareness settle inside her. She was still the same person in many ways, but she was also not. Those 5 seconds had marked her, not in a way she could easily explain, but in a way she would always remember. She didn't know yet how this moment would shape her future. She didn't know what lessons it would teach her or what strength it might draw out of her. All she knew was that something had changed, and there was no going back to how things were before. With slow, steady steps, she moved forward, carrying the weight of that realization with her. The fear had passed, but its echo remained, reminding her that even the shortest moments could leave the deepest marks. She stepped out into the hallway slowly, as if her body needed permission to move again. The floor beneath her feet felt firm and real, and she focused on that feeling to keep herself steady. Her surroundings looked familiar, yet everything seemed slightly different, like the colors had softened or the sounds had grown quieter. It was not dramatic, just enough to make her pause and notice. Her first instinct was to leave quickly, to put distance between herself and that room, but her body didn't rush. It moved carefully, thoughtfully, one step at a time. She followed the directions she had been given, her mind repeating them silently so she wouldn't forget. Simple steps, simple rules. Still, they felt important, like they carried more weight than ordinary instructions. As she walked, she noticed how tired she felt. Not the kind of tired that came from lack of sleep, but a deeper kind, the kind that settled in after emotional strain. Her shoulders felt heavy, and her head felt full, as if her thoughts were bumping into one another, all trying to be understood at once. She reached a quiet area and sat down again, as she was told to do for a short while. The chair was near a window. Outside, she could see people moving, cars passing, life continuing as it always did. The sight made her feel strangely distant, like she was watching the world from behind glass. She was still part of it, but also separate, at least for now. She rested her hands on her knees and took a slow breath, then another. Her breathing was steadier now, more natural. Her heart was still beating faster than usual, but it no longer felt out of control. She reminded herself that this was normal, that her body and mind needed time to catch up with what had just happened. Her thoughts drifted again, but this time they didn't race. They moved slowly, carefully. She thought about how she had felt just before everything began. The fear, the waiting, the tightness in her chest. Compared to that, this moment felt calmer, even if it was filled with questions. She wondered what she was supposed to feel now: relief, sadness, strength. She searched inside herself for clear emotions, but they didn't come neatly labeled. Instead, there was a mix of everything. A quiet relief that the moment was over, a soft sadness for reasons she couldn't fully explain. And beneath it all, a growing awareness that something inside her had shifted. She looked down at her hands. They looked the same as always, no visible sign of change. Yet she knew that appearances didn't tell the full story. Many of the biggest changes in life happened quietly, without leaving marks others could see. Someone passed by and offered a gentle reminder to take her time. She nodded in response, grateful for the kindness. Even small gestures felt larger now. She noticed them more. The tone of a voice, the way someone paused to make sure she was okay, these details mattered. After a while, she stood up again. Her movements were steadier this time. She gathered her belongings, checking twice to make sure she had everything. Losing something right now felt unthinkable. She wanted to keep things in order, to hold on to a sense of control wherever she could find it. When she stepped outside, fresh air filled her lungs. It felt cool and clean, and she inhaled deeply, letting it ground her. The sky above looked wide and open. She hadn't realized how closed-in she had felt until that moment. Standing there, she felt small but not powerless. She began walking, choosing a slow pace. Each step felt like a quiet decision to move forward. Her body responded well, and that gave her a bit of confidence. She focused on simple things as she walked: the sound of her steps, the feeling of her clothes against her skin, the rhythm of movement. Her phone buzzed softly in her bag. The sound startled her and she stopped walking. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. She wasn't sure she was ready to talk to anyone yet, but she also knew that staying silent for too long would make things harder later. She checked the screen. A message from someone close to her asking how things went. The words were simple and caring. She stared at them for a long time before responding. What could she say? She wasn't ready to explain. She didn't have the right words yet. After a moment, she typed a short reply. "I'm done, I'm okay." It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't a lie either. She was okay in the sense that she was safe and moving forward. The deeper understanding could come later. She put the phone away and continued walking. As she moved through familiar streets, she noticed how ordinary everything looked. Shops, houses, people going about their day. It felt strange to be surrounded by normal life when she felt anything but normal inside. She passed a place she used to visit often. A spot filled with memories of easier days. For a brief moment, she felt a sharp ache of longing for that version of herself. The one who didn't carry this weight. The one who believed things were simpler than they truly were. But the ache softened quickly. She realized that longing alone wouldn't help her. She couldn't go back, only forward. That thought didn't scare her as much as it might have before. It felt honest. When she reached her destination, she went inside and sat down. The quiet space gave her room to think. She placed her bag beside her and leaned back slightly, closing her eyes for a moment. Her body welcomed the rest. She replayed the events again, but this time without panic. She observed them from a distance, like watching a scene from someone else's life. The waiting, the fear, the brief intensity, the calm that followed. Seeing it this way made it feel more manageable. She realized something important then. The moment itself had been short, but the meaning she gave it would last much longer. How she chose to understand it, how she allowed it to shape her, that was still within her control. This thought didn't bring instant peace, but it brought clarity. She didn't need to have all the answers right now. She didn't need to feel a certain way. She only needed to give herself permission to take things one step at a time. As time passed, her body relaxed further. The tension that had been sitting in her shoulders began to ease. Her breathing found a natural rhythm. She felt present again, truly present, in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She opened her eyes and looked around. The space felt safe, familiar. She allowed herself to simply exist there for a while, without planning or worrying about what came next. Deep inside, she knew this was not the end of her journey. It was a turning point, a quiet one but significant. The path ahead would require patience and understanding, especially toward herself. She didn't feel strong in a loud, confident way. She felt strong in a quieter sense, like a tree that bends but does not break. The kind of strength that grows slowly, rooted in experience. As she finally stood up to continue her day, she carried this new awareness with her. The world hadn't changed, but she had. And though she couldn't yet see the full shape of that change, she trusted that, in time, it would make sense. For now, it was enough to keep moving, to keep breathing, and to allow herself the space to heal in her own way. The days that followed did not arrive with clear lines or sharp changes. They blended into one another, slow and quiet, like soft waves that kept returning to the shore. At first, she expected to wake up feeling different in an obvious way. She thought there would be a clear sign, something strong enough to tell her that everything had truly changed. But mornings came as they always had. The light entered her room the same way. The sounds outside were familiar. Life did not announce itself as new. Yet something was different. She noticed it in small moments. When she reached for her phone after waking up, she paused before checking messages. When she prepared her meals, she moved more slowly, more carefully. Even simple choices seemed to carry extra weight. It wasn't fear exactly. It was awareness. A quiet sense that she needed to pay attention now, not rush through things the way she used to. At first, she told herself that everything was fine. She smiled when people asked how she was doing. She answered with short, polite words. "I'm okay. I'm fine." The answers were not lies, but they were not the full truth either. She didn't yet know how to explain what she was feeling, so she chose silence instead. At night, when the world became quieter, her thoughts grew louder. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. The memory of that moment returned often, not sharply, but gently, like a reminder tapping on her shoulder. She didn't fight it. Fighting only made it stronger. Instead, she let the thoughts come and go, trying to understand them. Some nights were harder than others. On those nights, her chest felt tight again, and her breathing became shallow. She learned to sit up, place a hand over her heart, and breathe slowly until the feeling passed. She was learning new ways to care for herself, even when she didn't fully understand why she needed them. During the day, she went back to her usual routine. Work, responsibilities, small tasks that filled the hours. From the outside, nothing about her life looked different. People around her laughed, complained, planned for the future. She joined them when she could. She listened more than she spoke. She noticed changes in how she reacted to things. Small problems no longer upset her the way they used to. At the same time, small kindnesses touched her deeply. A simple question asked with care. A warm drink offered without being asked. These moments stayed with her longer than before. There were times when she felt distant from others, even when she was standing right beside them. Conversations felt lighter, while her thoughts felt heavier. She wondered if this distance would always be there, or if it was just part of the process. She reminded herself not to rush answers that needed time. One afternoon, she caught her reflection in a window as she passed by. She stopped for a moment and looked at herself. She looked the same, yet her eyes seemed different. There was a depth there that hadn't been before. Not sadness exactly, but understanding. She didn't look away this time. She held her own gaze and nodded slightly, as if acknowledging something unspoken. There were moments of doubt too. Moments when she questioned her decisions, replaying them again and again in her mind. What if things had been different? What if she had chosen another path? These thoughts came quietly, but they stayed long enough to trouble her. She learned that doubt was part of healing, not a sign of weakness. When the doubts grew heavy, she reminded herself of one simple truth. She had done the best she could with what she knew at the time. That thought didn't erase the questions, but it softened them. She began writing in a small notebook, something she hadn't done in years. She didn't write long stories or detailed explanations, just simple sentences. How she felt that day. What made her pause? What made her smile? Writing helped her see patterns she hadn't noticed before. It gave her thoughts a place to rest. Slowly, she started opening up to one person she trusted, not all at once, just small pieces, a sentence here, a feeling there. She was surprised by how much lighter she felt after sharing, even a little. The fear of being misunderstood didn't disappear, but it lost some of its power. She learned that healing was not a straight line. Some days felt hopeful and calm. Other days felt heavy for no clear reason. At first, the difficult days frustrated her. She wanted progress to be visible, measurable. But over time, she accepted that healing moved in waves. The important thing was not avoiding the hard days, but learning how to move through them. She became kinder to herself in small ways. She allowed herself to rest without guilt. She said no when she needed to. She stopped forcing herself to be strong for others all the time. These changes were quiet, but they mattered. She noticed that her sense of time had shifted. She thought less about rushing toward the future and more about being present. Simple moments became important. sitting quietly with a warm drink, watching the sky change colors in the evening. These moments reminded her that life was still happening, still offering beauty even in uncertainty. Sometimes fear returned unexpectedly. A sound, a place, a thought could bring back that tight feeling in her chest. When it happened, she no longer panicked. She acknowledged it, breathed through it, and reminded herself that she was safe. Each time she did this, the fear lost a little more of its hold. She realized that strength didn't always look like confidence or certainty. Sometimes, strength was simply continuing. Getting out of bed, showing up, being honest with herself about what she could and couldn't handle. As weeks passed, she felt more grounded, not because everything made sense, but because she trusted herself more. She trusted her ability to face discomfort, to ask for help when needed, and to take care of herself without apology. She no longer saw herself only through the lens of that moment. It was part of her story, but it was not the whole story. She was still learning, still growing, still capable of joy. One evening, as she sat quietly watching the day fade into night, she felt a gentle sense of acceptance. Not acceptance of pain, but acceptance of change. Life had shifted, and so had she. And while the path ahead was still unclear, she knew she was walking it with greater awareness and compassion. She didn't feel healed in a final way. She didn't expect to. Healing, she understood now, was ongoing. It was a relationship with herself that required patience and honesty. And for the first time since everything had happened, that thought did not scare her. It gave her hope. Time continued to move forward, steady and quiet, and she moved with it. Not because everything felt easy, but because she had learned that stopping completely would only pull her backward. Each day added a small layer of understanding, like pages slowly filling a book she hadn't known she was writing. She began to notice how her reactions had changed. Situations that once made her anxious now felt manageable. Not simple, not effortless, but possible. She paused more before responding. She listened to herself instead of pushing her feelings aside. This new way of living felt unfamiliar at first, like wearing shoes that needed time to fit, but slowly it became natural. She no longer rushed to explain herself to everyone. She realized that not all people needed to know her full story, and that was okay. Protecting her peace became important. She chose carefully who she shared her thoughts with, and when she did, she spoke honestly, without trying to make her experiences sound smaller or lighter than they were. There were moments when she surprised herself. Moments when she spoke up instead of staying quiet. Moments when she walked away from situations that drained her energy. These choices were small on the surface, but they represented a deeper change. She was no longer living only to meet expectations. She was learning to honor her own needs. She still remembered that moment clearly, the few seconds that had shifted everything. But the memory no longer felt sharp or overwhelming. It had settled into a quiet place within her, no longer demanding attention but always present. It was part of her, like a scar that didn't hurt anymore but reminded her of what she had survived. As months passed, she began to see how that experience had shaped her in unexpected ways. She became more patient, especially with people who were struggling. She noticed signs of quiet pain in others that she might have missed before, a pause in someone's voice, a tired look behind a smile. Instead of judging, she offered kindness. She found herself drawn to moments of honesty, conversations that mattered. Silence that felt safe instead of uncomfortable. She stopped filling every gap with noise or distraction. She learned that silence could be a space for healing. Her confidence grew slowly, not from achievement but from self-trust. She trusted her instincts more. Trusted her limits. Trusted that if another difficult moment came, she would find a way through it just as she had before. There were setbacks, of course. Days when old fears returned without warning. Days when she felt tired of being strong. On those days, she no longer blamed herself. She rested. She reminded herself that progress did not mean never struggling again. It meant knowing how to respond when struggle appeared. One day, she realized she was laughing more freely. Not forced laughter, but real, easy laughter that came from deep within. It surprised her at first. She paused, noticing how light it felt. She allowed herself to enjoy it without guilt, without wondering if it meant she was forgetting something important. Joy, she understood now, did not erase the past. It existed alongside it. She began making plans again, small ones at first, things to look forward to, a visit, a project, a quiet goal just for herself. Planning no longer felt risky, it felt hopeful. When she looked back at who she had been before, she felt compassion instead of regret. That version of her had done the best she could with the understanding she had at the time. She honored that. Without that person, she wouldn't be who she was now. She noticed that people around her responded to her differently. Some sensed the change without knowing why. They described her as calmer, more grounded. She smiled when she heard that. Not because she felt perfect, but because she knew how hard she had worked to reach this place. One evening, she sat quietly and reflected on the journey she had taken. Not just the hard moment, but everything that followed. The confusion, the growth. The quiet strength that had formed without her noticing. She realized that those 5 seconds had not defined her life. They had redirected it. She no longer measured her worth by how much she could endure in silence. She understood that asking for support, setting boundaries, and choosing herself were acts of courage, not weakness. She felt proud of herself, not in a loud or boastful way, but in a deep, steady way that felt earned. She had faced fear. She had allowed herself to change. She had stayed. As the future stretched ahead, uncertain but open, she felt ready. Not because she had all the answers, but because she trusted her ability to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep choosing herself one day at a time. And when she thought of that whispered sentence from the past, she no longer felt sadness or fear. She felt gratitude. Gratitude for the strength it revealed. Gratitude for the life it reshaped. Those 5 seconds had changed her forever, not by taking something away, but by showing her who she truly was.